My name is Dolin, and for the last 27 years, my team of tutors and college consultants and executive function coaches have all been helping kids to do better in school. And whether that be middle school, high school, or college, we've got you covered. Today, we're here to talk about college without chaos, helping your students stay focused and on track as they transition into college. But before we start, I want to take a moment to think ahead. Let's say that your child is off in their freshman year already. Wouldn't it feel amazing if they came home from college break and said, Mom or Dad, I've got this. I'm doing so well. I've really got a good balance between my classes, my friends, my extracurriculars, and you see it in their grades. And everybody is feeling really positive about college. Well, that is certainly possible if kids have the right tools. So today I have an expert with me. Rachael. Hello and welcome.
Thanks for having me on.
Please meet Rachael Moss. Rachael is an executive function coach here with me at Educational Connections. And not only that, but she runs our professional development for all of our educators in-house. Rachael is a former teacher. She taught at the middle school level, the high school level, and also at the college level. She has a master's degree in both literature and secondary education. So Rachael, let's talk a little bit about what we're actually going to talk about today. What
Yeah.
can parents walk away with?
So we're going to talk about strategies that are going to help all college students, especially those going into their first year. But honestly, this can help students any year that they're in college. And these are all strategies that are going to support executive function. They will help students with tasks that they face each day. It doesn't matter what classes they're taking. It doesn't matter what major they're in. These strategies are going to help.
Awesome. All right. Oh, and by the way, I want to mention to everybody, I have to tell you, I love this checklist that you created. The 10 components or systems that kids need to have and to know about before going into their freshman year. Tell us a little bit about this checklist.
So I put this together to facilitate conversations. When I work with college students in my sessions with Educational Connections, we really work through the process of getting ready for college. And at first, I don't know what the kid has done, what they haven't done. And so it's really conversation that at first helps me, quote unquote, get up to speed. What have you done? What do you need to do? What do we need to schedule for you? And so this guide goes through that questioning process. I wanted the checklist to have some questions that will facilitate conversations in families to help with the back to campus process. So it's everything from, how do you organize a schedule to where do I find my syllabi on my learning management system?
Awesome. I love that. I love the idea of like just starting a conversation. All
Mm-hmm.
right, so let's dig in and talk about the systems on campus. There's really four things that kids need to master in order to be successful in college. The first is a learning management system, which is really the portal where all their work is housed. The second is their university email, especially when kids aren't used to checking in on email. They need
Yeah.
to know how to use their syllabi for classes, and they need to have mastered note taking. So,
Yeah.
Rachel, let's dive into these one at a time because I completely agree. These are the most essential things for kids. And starting with the learning management system, first, what is this and how is it different from high school? And maybe more importantly, what can kids do to master it?
Yeah. So the first thing I do want to say, because I see we have like nearly 30 folks joining us today. As you're listening to Ann and I have this conversation, I really want to encourage you to join the conversation. Put your questions in the chat, like in real time. And then, we're going to have question and answer at the end. But I always find that, like, when I have a thought immediately, if I write it down, I don't lose it. And so I think it's really great because as we're talking about this, you may immediately think of a situation just this whole time, put your questions in and we're going to talk about them. But okay, we're going to talk first about the learning management system. So every single college, university, and high school has like a different one. And when kids are in high school, they are using a learning management system. And some common ones are things like Schoology, Google Classroom, Canvas. And it's a place where their teachers are putting announcements about the class, are putting assignments, places where they have to turn in assignments. And generally, when they get to college, there is a little bit of a disconnect because in high school, the learning management system is part of like a bigger ecosystem. And I can speak about this from my extensive experience in the classroom. So in my literature classroom, I had a Schoology online where I would post assignments, where I would post materials to help, teacher created notes, those sorts of things. I would have a calendar of when assignments were due. But then when the kids walked in my room, there were things on the board. There was a bulletin board of assignments. There was a little note about homework. So there's all kinds of messaging that's happening in the high school. When we get to college, and this is like kind of, no-brainer for us as grown-ups and parents and guardians of college students, we understand that when we get to college, that learning management system is the place where all of the information resides. But it's almost like a little culture shock sometimes for college students where they know that they use this learning management system, but they are not used to having it be one of the sole means of communication. So there are students where they kind of expect that maybe the professor will announce something in class, or that, I don't know, there will be like an announcement, like we have announcements in a high school. So we really have to gauge with kids, is this different from high school, or is it the same? In which ways is it the same? In which ways is it different? And students often will not necessarily know things that we may think are easy to understand, like where my professors are posting work. If the professors are using this as a way to communicate with students. And so getting a good routine with the learning management system is paramount for starting off any semester of college, because that's going to be their hub where they're getting everything for all of their classes.
That makes sense, Rachel. And I think we just assume like, oh, kids automatically know how
Yeah,
to use it. But I know a lot of your work when you start with kids in August is like, okay, let's look at your specific learning management system and dissect it together.
yeah.
You also do the same type of work when it comes to the university email. That
Mhm.
this is common sense to us, but because kids haven't grown up having to use email, it's sometimes different for them.
Yeah.
Why is this important? How do you help kids?
So, what I find is that for high school and middle school students, email is an additional mode of communication. But then when we get into like the college level, it mirrors more of the workflows that we have as adults. So when you're in high school, your email is an additional way that information is shared with you, whether it's like the football schedule or information about your extracurricular, or, a reminder from your math teacher that there's a test. Where at the university level now, it is everything not only about your classes, but also about the community where you live. And I know I told you this a couple days ago, Anne, but I had a university student that I started working with a few years ago. And when he and I started working together, started working together in his sophomore year. He was very confused as to like why he couldn't understand the patterns in his classes. And he was really having a hard time with different professors. And so in one of our first sessions, I said, you know what, how about let's try some basic self-advocacy. Let's open up your email and let's send an email to your professor. And he's like, okay, well, let me get my Gmail. I said, no, 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 you got to use your university email. And when he opened it up, he had about 2 years of email that he had never checked. This wasn't, and another thing that I've found by talking to young people is that students have a very different relationship with these electronic communication methods than like we do. I think like if you've ever seen a young person's phone, like first of all, this is also where I reveal like I'm not popular. Like I don't have a whole bunch of notifications going off. You know what I mean? I don't have a whole bunch of sounds and haptics in my world. I don't have a whole bunch of apps that are constantly trying to get my attention, but they generally do. And so some of these things, they have an aversion to anything that's coming to their phone sometimes that we don't. So one of the first things that I do is I will talk with students about, okay, let's look at your current patterns. Like, do you check things on a computer? Do you check things on a phone? Do you use social media? Do you like to check the news? And so we kind of identify what are the patterns where you're using a screen to gain information. And then I like to add in the new habit of, okay, well, before you check TikTok, let's open up your university email. Let's open up the app for your learning management system. Sometimes it's as simple as adding in a step to a routine that's already there, and it can have really good results because then it becomes a process of, oh, I've opened up my phone. Oh, let me check my school email. Let me see if my professor sent anything. These seem like so simple, but these are things that have dramatic output for students who are in college.
Yeah, that's so true,
Yeah.
Rachel. The same thing when it comes to the syllabi. Kids don't always understand how to use it. And so
Hmm.
talk to us a little bit about the best way to approach kids and how to get them to the point where they use this as a really helpful tool.
Yeah. This is also something where, when I started at Educational Connections, I had a little bit of like like I don't know, I'm just gonna say I kind of felt old because back in my day, the syllabus was a piece of paper that was handed out to everybody. And what I've learned is that's not happening. And so there's been a big transition to using learning management systems online for all of these materials. And when you think about it, having your syllabus online makes so much sense. Sometimes professors will post it as a PDF, so it's like that, paper-like version. Other times, professors will post it on a calendar that will integrate with apps on our phone like iCal or Google Calendar. But a lot of times, students are not sure where these are. I have a student that I've been working with since high school. And when she went to college, she was so frustrated that her professor was only talking about assignments a few days before they were due. And this student had told me before that these professors haven't given, I was like, where are your syllabi? These professors haven't given me any syllabi. And we worked together. This was a hard thing for this particular student. And we worked together, and by our, third session of the year, this student and I looked on the learning management system, and then we found all of the syllabi. And there was a lot of frustration there at first because she was really feeling like these professors don't care about me. They're not telling me where anything's due. How did I know there was reading? And lo and behold, she had had these things since 2 weeks before class started. And this was a process of, sometimes students, especially like our college students, they want to do everything themselves. They also feel, and I've seen this so much with syllabi, that I'm in college now, I should be able to do this. And sometimes it takes us as the grown-ups facilitating those conversations to say, okay, I'm going to keep trying to talk to you about this. I'm going to come back to you and talk to you about this. And so that was a real success that we were able to work together and get this student to see, you know what, I didn't know where this was. And I'm really glad that I had somebody to talk with me about it so that I could learn something and help myself.
Yeah, it's such a great way to get started in the year. Even just
Mm-hmm.
having that runway of like a few sessions really is super helpful.
Yeah.
All right. So the other thing that kids need to do well is to take notes. And
Yeah.
a lot of what's happened around technology has been changing in the last year. What's going on, Rachel?
Okay, so I have seen this in about the last 18 months because I not only work with college students during, the fall and spring semester. I also work with them when they're in the summer semester. And I have really seen a lot of universities and a lot of professors have policies that disallow electronic devices in the classroom slash lecture hall. So that means that, even a couple years ago, one of the biggest things that folks were getting for their college students was an iPad and an Apple Pencil because it is a great way to take notes. Well, now, especially with different like digital assistants, the things that we call like AI, you have students that are coming into the classroom or into the lecture hall, turning on a transcription app on their computer, booting up a game or a movie, and they're kind of clocking out for the classroom or the lecture. And what tends to happen is, and we have lots of research that backs this up, that when students are disengaged in this way, they are not paying attention, they are not gaining information from the lecture. So, by disallowing these electronic devices in the classroom, universities are pushing for handwritten notes, notebook, pencil, pen type of notes. So, it's important for students to understand that this may be a policy. And I would say, if we have any like folks who are with us today, maybe you've observed this, maybe you've, heard of this, because I sure have seen it a lot. So it's really important for students to have a note-taking system that isn't relying on like a transcription service because those things do not help you learn, and more universities are cracking down on these types of things.
Yeah, I've seen the same thing, Rachel. A lot
Yeah.
of parents will say, well, what is the best way to take notes? And I'm wondering if you could share a bit about what you found to be most successful with kids.
Yeah, I gotta be real with you. I love Cornell notes. Cornell notes have been around since the 60s or earlier. They're not going anywhere. It is a great note-taking method. There are wonderful free resources online. Like if you Google Cornell notes, you can find a high-quality YouTube video about how to take them. You can find a template that you can print out. And I in my sessions, this is actually what I do because working with college students on a note-taking system is something that I do in the very beginning of my sessions with them. So I will ask them, what's your favorite zoo animal? And then I find about a 5-minute YouTube video about that animal, whether it's sharks. I have learned about so many animals, by the way. Giraffes, whatever. And then we go through the format of Cornell Notes. We watch the little 5-minute YouTube together, and the student takes notes on that nonfiction information. And this is a great way to practice because number one, there's like, what pressure is there if you're learning about baby elephants, So it's something that is like the student understands like this isn't for real, this isn't for a grade. It's also something where the student is able to immediately see how much detail they're capturing. And Cornell notes, if you're not familiar, are asking for you to take notes whether in bulleted points or in sentences, but also to identify things like keywords. And then at the end of your note-taking session, it encourages you to write a summary. And I always say to students, write 3 to 5 sentences with details about what you learned. And it's something that you can do with just any piece of paper and any writing utensil, and it works for any discipline. So that's always the first one I go to. It ain't broke, we're not going to fix it.
I hear you. I love Cornell notes
Me
too.
too.
So powerful. Yes, for sure. All right, so let's talk a little bit about managing time because this is huge for kids. They have so much structured time in high school and then
Mhm.
they have a lot of free time. How do you and the other coaches help them to plan it out?
So whenever you're helping students, it that I think that you really hit the nail on the head there, and when you were talking about like free time and structured time, because the other thing that I observe is when students are going to college now, the free time is coming during different times of the day. So I have like some key questions that I use to help students direct their study time. Like for example, what times of day or what days of the week would you study? Like some students, they will think, oh, well, okay, in high school, I used to study on Sundays, so I have to study on Sunday. But then we examine their schedule. Well, you only have one class on Wednesday. If you used Wednesday as a time for studying and homework, planning out your papers, you can free up Sunday. So it's a process of getting them to reimagine their time. And then we also talk through practical concerns. I think like probably everybody here, we can think back to that friend or that roommate that we had in college that maybe listened to the annoying music or played video games loudly in the room. Sometimes a study space isn't exactly the dorm room. And so then like I will spend a lot of times working with students and actually like a campus map, or some universities have like an app that's also a map where we look at, okay, here's your class. Now you have 3 hours. Is there a study area in that building? Is there a study area in or around the dining hall, in or around the library, so that they can find somewhere that they can work on campus between their classes? And again, this is stuff that like for us as grown-ups, people that have been through college, this seems so mundane. But I am telling you, I work with students every day, college students every single day. And when we work through these processes, it's like I have revealed wizard level secrets to them. I have a student, for example, who we started with a time management goal for study time. And the student identified, like we started working together over the summer, and the student identified that she wanted to work when she had classes. And we actually have our sessions during her big study break. She has a 3 hour study break on Tuesdays. We meet in the middle of that. So every week we are setting goals for study time. We're working on time management, and the session works as like an accountability buddy in a way because we're meeting right in the middle of that study time. And so we start every session with, okay, how's the reading going? Or do you want to work together collaboratively on that reading response that you're doing? So there are so many ways to make the study time also work with different tools that allow students to use their time very effectively.
Yeah, you're right on with that, Rachel. It's so huge for kids.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, one of my sons who had what my oldest son said, "Oh, mom, I got this. Like, I don't need any help." And it didn't go so well his freshman year of his first semester of freshman year. Um, because he didn't have he would go back to his room, his dorm room right
Yeah.
after because he was so tired. Um, with my younger son, though, I thought, okay, no, you're starting out with a coach from the get-go. And it was just so much smoother for him. And
Mm-hmm.
things like this, just like identifying the study place, the study time, not going back to your room, it just makes a huge difference. And when kids feel
Yeah.
that success early on, it just like, I think it empowers them to get through the rest of the year. And it
It
really,
really does. It
yeah,
really does, and it's also I think working with a coach too. Another thing that I observe with a lot of my students is the myths that they have about college. And this is actually good to start talking about with like keeping track of time. You know what I mean? Because one of the things that I see with a lot of students is they like, okay, whenever you watch a movie about college, there's always the stereotype of the all-nighter. You know what I mean? Oh, I got this paper. I'm going to be up all night doing it, like that college student. And so many times kids will think, oh, well, I have to, I'll eat dinner and then I'll work on this and I won't sleep. And so time, especially when you're on that college campus, it can be something that is very hard to keep track of or to manage. And so like, working with a coach is a great way to do that because that's something that I start to work with them about. Like, when do you think college students study? Or why do you think that college students have to pull an all-nighter to get things done, And there are great ways for kids to keep track of their time. So some of the students that I work with, some universities actually give students access to a variety of powerful tools. There are two that I really do like for students. One is called Notion, one is called Shovel. Now, whenever I talk about anything that has to do with planners, I do want to put like a little, like I guess like a caution over this because if you buy a student a planner, whether it's a physical planner or a planner service, the only thing that guarantees you is that you've spent money on a planner. So whenever we want students to use these apparatuses, we have to make sure that these are things they know how to use. And so if we want students to keep track of time in like a planner, whether it's digital or physical, we have to kind of ask ourselves, is this a habit that they have? How can we foster a new habit rather than just giving them something and thinking, well, okay, you have this, now this should like take care of everything. So it's really great, a great way in college to develop a new habit because a lot of times students are very motivated by the new environment, the university. It's like new year, new me kind of thing. So there is like a motivation there when you get on campus. The biggest question, though, that I ask to help students keep track of time is what systems helped you when you were in high school? When you were in marching band and when you were running cross country and when you had to get your homework done, what helped you keep track of your time and your responsibilities? And can these same systems help you now? That because past performance is going to be our biggest indicator of future success. So tapping into what students used to be successful in the past, it's really going to help them in their like future in college.
Do you ever get kids where they haven't been that successful and they've kind of pulled out decent grades in high school because they've just been pumped up by adrenaline and they'll do things at the last minute, which by the way, that doesn't work in college. Um, and so they don't really have a system. What do you do
Yeah.
there?
Yeah, so that does happen pretty darn frequently. When I do ask them what helped you keep track of things in the past, even those students that are pulling it out at the last minute using a combination of, procrastination and audacity, they will identify something that they were able to use to keep things on track. So like for example, I have of course I have a student that this was her exact thing. So when she was in high school, she identified that the reason that she was procrastinating so much is because the assignments were not hard for her. And she had time in class to do a lot of the work. So when we identify that, okay, that kept you on track in the past, and you would procrastinate on different projects, but you always got your homework done because you had class time to work on it. We actually looked at her high school schedule. What times of day were you working on things? And she identified, well, around like sixth period, I would have a study hall. Okay, let's see the overlap of that time of day in your college calendar. And so it's a gradual process of like, okay, let's make you a quote unquote study hall every single day of the week. And let's get something you're going to do during every one of these created study halls. And that was a target that she could hit. And by the time that, I mean, I'm still working with her now. She's going to graduate college. She now is keeping track of everything on, I think she uses Notion and she syncs it with her phone. And she also has a paper calendar because she also has in her last year of college a full-time job. So she went from this procrastination queen to somebody who has everything regulated because we were able to identify one thing that worked in the past and use that past success to gradually increase the future success.
I love that, Rachel.
Yeah,
That's a great story. Thank you for sharing that. All right. So other things that can help kids in college are the learning centers, writing centers,
yeah.
going to office hours. How do you help kids with that when they're sometimes resistant or they don't want to go or they don't think they need to go?
This one, so I gotta be real with you. When I was in college, I worked at the writing center. Okay, I know I've never revealed this to you, Anne, so this is like juicy intel. I was the top tutor at the writing center, something that I told everyone annoyingly everywhere I went. So I love the writing center. I love how it helps students. I have also seen evidence, these are things that weren't on my university campus, things like help rooms. Help rooms are designed for certain either certain classes or certain like class clusters. So for example, I have a student who is in a very technical science program, and they will have help rooms that are clustered around like the thermodynamics, the fluid dynamics classes. And students can go there and work with a teaching assistant, a grad student. Writing centers are where you bring a paper or something that you've written and you work with an individual writing tutor who is a fellow student, a grad student, or a teaching assistant. And then, of course, there are, professor office hours where they can help students one-on-one with material in the classes. These are things I always coach students to use. And I always start from a very practical standpoint. I never start by telling the kid about the great knowledge that they're going to get. I actually start by telling them, you're already paying for this. Like this is part of your university experience. This is essentially free with your university costs, and this is all designed to get you your best grade. The other thing that I always talk to students about with writing centers and help rooms especially is that you are not only working with somebody who can help you with content, you are going to work with somebody who knows the professors who have assigned the assignments. So when I was on campus in my writing center, we would always have somebody like my first master's degree is in literature. So I was like the literature humanities one. We had somebody who was in the School of Education, somebody who was in the School of Law. And when folks would come in, we would ask them, okay, well, what paper are you writing this for? We would ask them what the paper was and who the professor was. And we could talk with our fellow students one-on-one, not only about the content, but like, you know what? You better clean this up because Dr. Labriola is going to ding you if you have any passive voice in this paper. We knew the ins and outs of the way that the professors graded and what they were looking for in the work. They are invaluable resources because they not only help students learn about content and about writing, they also help students navigate things for individual professors. And they also help students, if a student is intimidated, well, I don't want to, go and meet with that professor during his office hours. Writing centers and help rooms, those students who are working in there are always helping their fellow students like, oh, he's so nice. I mean, go to his office hours. My one professor had a drawer full of chocolate. Whenever a student would show up to come to office hours to get like tutoring help, he would be like, can I offer you a snack? And had like all little like goodies in his bottom drawer. These are the types of things that students get to know by working with other students. And by encouraging students to go to those writing centers and those help rooms, they're not only getting the subject support and the skill support that they need, they're also getting those invaluable peer interactions that are sometimes hard, especially for freshmen, you know?
And Rachel, I was just thinking, like, it's one thing when the parent says, "Oh, honey, you should go to this," and can be
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, whatever, mom." But it's also another thing when you or a coach shows it, because then kids are more likely to do it.
Yeah, I have to say that's been I had a student that she's now out of college, but when we were working together, she was really struggling with her papers. And I was like, we have got to get you to the writing center because we were, of course, working on her papers in our sessions. That was one of our goals to increase those writing skills. But there were things that certain professors were looking for that, I am incredibly knowledgeable about writing, but I don't know, Dr. last name at certain university. I don't know what specifically this professor is looking for. And so I really encouraged her to go to the writing center. And when she went and then she turned in her next paper and she went up an entire letter grade. It was so motivating for her. I mean, I got to admit, like I was, I'm like all bells and whistles about like the writing center and the help room. So that she did tell me that that was very encouraging to her because she said, I feel like, if you wouldn't have like told me about it from somebody that worked there, I would have felt really intimidated by it or thought that like they would think I was dumb. That, and I've noticed that a lot. I know I felt like that as a young person, that you feel like, I know that this is something that so many college students deal with, this feeling of, I should know this.
Mhm.
But one of the greatest things about any university community is there are so many places to go when you feel like you should know it, but you just don't because you're young.
Yeah, for sure,
Yeah.
Rachel. All right. So, oh, by the way, everybody, we're going to get to Q&A in just a second. So if you have a question, please throw it in the chat and we want to make sure we get to it. So I know when you and the other coaches work with college students, that there's a very clear process that you use in your sessions. Do you just want to touch on that real quick, Rachel?
Yeah. So whenever we are working, this is me, this is anybody on our team that's working with college students, everything is fully tailored to that student. And so we're working with executive function skills, and sometimes we're working with students that have maybe an academic goal. So I've mentioned that I'm well versed in the humanities. So I'll get students that have an executive function goal, and they may also have a writing goal. We also have folks on our team that they are experts in mathematics or in science, that we have a student that has an academic goal and also has an executive function goal. So we're focusing on our goals first and foremost. We are also tailoring everything to the student's need and schedule. So in my sessions, in all of our sessions, we are getting those syllabi and we are using those to structure our time, coming up with a plan for the week, for the month, putting in that work schedule, making time for that big football game that they want to go to, and also piecing out those big projects. Because, on the syllabus, it'll say, hey, that term paper is due in 4 weeks, which seems like, okay, that's forever and a day in the future. But now we got to schedule in, when do we go to the library? When do we read all of the sources and take our notes on them? So in our sessions, we are focusing on executive function skills that are absolutely tied to the work that the kid is currently doing in their college classes.
Yeah, that's super helpful, Rachel, because
Yeah.
you cannot teach these things in theory. You can't teach
No.
like, oh, let me show you how to prioritize this. It only works when you teach it within
Yeah.
the context of their work. Let's talk about how you're going to prioritize these assignments.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah,
honestly,
let's do a multiple choice and you give me the right answer. Like that doesn't prove anything.
it's really where the magic happens is when it's,
Yeah.
because a lot of these kids have skill gaps. They don't necessarily know how to do that. So that's really super helpful. All right, so Rachel, thank you for that. And everybody out there, we're happy to help. If you have a college student or a student going off to college that you think might benefit from Rachel's work and the work that our coaches do, we have a plan that starts at 8 hours. So it kind of really gets your child started from now till their first term grade or their midterm grade, or even further than that. Rachel, do you want to talk a little bit about that kind of like starter package?
Yeah, so if most colleges are starting up the week starting like the 25th of August, and if you are having a session 1 hour a week, that package is getting you to October. And sometimes this is a bunch of students on that have joined my roster. Students, they want to be independent, and they may think at first like, I can do this on my own. You know, I don't need this kind of support. I'm going to be in college. Things are going to be different. But this type of an introduction into this coaching, it can be so valuable because from the beginning of the year to midterms, those are massive assignments. So it's not like you're just, sitting around and talking about things in theory. You are working in the nuts and bolts of a kid's schedule and projects so that the student can see the value of being able to plan, have additional accountability. Another thing that like I am very invested in their grades, but I am not someone who grades them. That is a very valuable thing. I am somebody who's very invested in their future, but when they're complaining to me about how like they don't want to do their reading, it's not like, well, you need to do it. It's more like, okay, let's take some of the pain out of this and figure out strategies so that you can get this stuff done efficiently. It's an invaluable resource to be able to have somebody else in your corner that is helping you get it done and also helping to take some of the stress and pressure off of you.
Rachel, I had a parent just ask, do you have experience with neurodivergent kids? And I'm wondering if you can talk on that.
Yeah. So our team, we work with students that deal with all sorts of different learning exceptionalities. So, for example, I am a coach who is able to work with students on the spectrum, and I have several students on the spectrum that I currently work with. One in particular, she and I started working together when she was leaving high school. We worked together to transition her from high school to college, and we have now worked together. She is going to be a junior. And this is a student who, when we started working together, we were not only working on academics, we were also planning for things like, okay, if I am feeling intimidated by the dining hall because it is a sensory experience that I am not enjoying, how am I going to plan for the future so that I can have like good meals? So we were working things in that were supporting all of her. And she went from a student who was like, that was one of her big struggles, that dining hall. And I shared with her that this is something that I dealt with when I went to school. I actually, when I was first in a dining hall, the noise of it turned my stomach. It was a sensory experience that was jarring for me. And this student went from having a real issue with that type of thing. And now she is this last, we just had some of our sessions over the summer before the year started. She's like picking out restaurants. She's like, I mean, Chipotle, but not every day. And she's like planning how she's going to do all of her dining. She's become very adventurous. And it's because we can support all of her. Now, these are experiences I'm having, but I am so blessed because at Educational Connections, I not only get to work with students, I get to work with all the other coaches. We have folks on our team who are educators who are experts in helping students with ADHD, with all other sorts of exceptionality that we are dealing with, not only in the academic environment, but also in our lives. Because when we are working with college students, we're not only helping with academics, we're also doing some of those things that I kind of think of as like adulting, you know? How do we get the laundry done? How do we get our food? So yeah. And Kathy, I love that question. I really hope that helps you.
That's awesome, Rachel. Thank you so much. And everybody out there, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. It was such a pleasure to see all of you on the call. I hope this was helpful. And we're going to send you a follow-up email tomorrow, condensing everything we talked about. Rachel, thank you for being my guest as
Thank
always.
you, Anne.
I hope everybody has a wonderful day. Take care and bye-bye.